Hello, I'm Michael Verney and welcome along to the Indo GAA Podcast with thanks to AIB. AIB is at the heart of Gaelic games across both club and county, and in 2025 they're celebrating a decade of sponsoring the All-Ireland Senior Football Championships. With this year's championship shaping up to be one of the most competitive in years, AIB is more excited than ever to bring fans closer to the action. Check out the hashtag #TheToughest for more. Welcome to Indo GAA. Delighted to be joined by Pat Spillane and Dick Clerkin to look back on what was not a busy football weekend in terms of quantity, but we did have two provincial finals to look back on. But just something that immediately came into my head. Pat Spillane regularly says about not leaving the house, and yet I find he has a remarkably nice tan when we bring him up on screen there. Pat, how do you balance the sun and the screen?
I spend. We're living in paradise at the moment here, and I live on the shores of Kinmare Bay. And since the sun started shining 9 days ago, I go out on the deck. I have my breakfast out there, my lunch out there, my tea out there. I bring my laptop out and I watch all this. If there's sport to be watched, I watch it outside. It's absolute paradise, and I've been soaking in the sun as well. So absolute magic. If Kerry is nice at the best of times, but with sunshine today, Kinmare Bay is like just a sheet of glass. It's paradise. So I'm lucky and privileged to be living in paradise.
Pat, people talk about, like, there's all these wellness professionals going around. You have it all sussed. You have it sussed out.
You should set it up. You could, like, a wellness retreat to Pat's house. You can watch a game of football, sit out, have the breakfast, charge them with...
Yeah, you're right there, because you look at the modern day society, and I start to say, geez, if I was around nowadays young, I'd start off as a wellness is big, yeah. Wellness, I could be a wellness guru, yeah, that's big. I could be, and I look at all the other things, a blogger, a vlogger, a content creator, an Instagrammer. Geez, there's a lot of gigs there. And the great thing about all those gigs, no qualifications required, bar neck.
We'll chat a bit of football, lads, because there was plenty to chat about. Dick, I'll come to you first. Really good Connacht final again. Same as last year. Really intriguing right down the stretch. Galway just found a little bit more when Mayo got on their coattails again. What was the winning and losing of this game from a Galway point of view?
Well, a couple of things. It was brilliant to see such a huge turnout. You know, people were sort of, myself included, with the All-Ireland draw, did it put a sort of a context around a game that it shouldn't, in terms of where the winners were going to go versus the losers. You got no sense of that. It was a standout Connacht final. Both teams, 100% endeavour, and all fans went there looking for a win and support. So that was great. That's what you want in your provincial finals. That was great, and that set the game up for what transpired. I think not for the first time in Mayo's storied history, just a bit of technical deficiency up front, and sort of just too many, sort of a narrow channel of score getters. And when it came to it, Galway just had a better spread of better footballers, and the fine margin sort of played out. I think Kevin McStay and Mayo can take an awful lot from it. There's a question mark where they're at. But at the end of the day, Galway are rightly up there now in the top 2 or 3. Mayo should have won that game. So Mayo can't be that far away either. But as I say, it's the same things that keep sort of coming up in terms of their ability to take chances down the home stretch, decision making, all of those sort of things. The performance of Aidan O'Shea sort of typified Mayo in abundance. Lots of endeavour, but a lot of silly mistakes and turnovers. Scored in the game from play. You can't have a forward of his stature and impact not scoring from play. I think so. They will look back on that game. I'd say there's a lot of instances they'll be sort of really, really sorry. And can they improve that, or is that just part and parcel of Mayo's play, that they're going to be mistake ridden, a lot of missed chances? Whereas Galway they just look like a team that's ready to win in All-Ireland, and should have won one by now. They have a spread of players in the right positions. They have a confidence about them. Like Killian McDade, typified that. Yeah. Just an absolute baller in terms of how he plays the game, his confidence, his drive. And then when the scores were there, I think he had 3 points, 3 shots, or whatever it was. Just they looked like everything you'd want in a team. And they won a game that most teams, Kerry, Dublin, Armagh, very few teams would have won that game from that position. Like they were beaten. Like there was a level game with 15 minutes, and I don't know how they done it, but that's just through their ability to win hard ball, like the scores that they had to get were all hard won scores, because you had to sort of get it in that 20 yards further than Mayo's equivalent. And the fact that they won that game, like that was a serious performance for Galway in the second half to eke that out, because, you know, if you were betting and running going down the straight, it would have been hard to put good money on Galway, but Mayo will be very sick now and say, looking back in terms of what they left behind there.
Just stay on Galway for a second, Pat. You know, the Dylan McHugh block, Conor Gleeson getting a touch on that. Now we'll chat about that now in a minute, about whether that should be a 2-1. McDade's run. They just had some big plays at important times, Pat.
Yeah, first of all, you know, it was the 5th weekend of Gaelic Football Championship, and in my opinion, that last Sunday's kind of final was probably the best of the 5, because it had everything. You know, we were raving about Augusta and Rory McIlroy's, but last Sunday, it was an epic sporting contest of drama, of intensity, physicality, man-to-man battles, unbelievable individual displays from McHugh, McDade, Paul Conroy. Some brilliant skill execution, you know, the save from Conor Gleeson, Matthew Tierney's penalty, the solo run from Cillian McDade at the end, Keane Herland's magnificent catch under pressure. It was a roller coaster game, a result in doubt up to the final whistle. Great atmosphere with a full house in Castlebar, and everything that you wanted from a sporting contest was in Castlebar last Sunday. Geez, I really enjoyed it. Galway, if you had told me a couple of weeks ago, by the way, Comer and Shane Watts will not be playing in the Connacht final, you'd be giving Mayo a great chance. You would be writing off slightly Galway. But this is a different Galway team this year. And I noticed a couple of things. First of all, they're building a panel, which they didn't have, I think, in previous years. Yeah. The subs that came on last Sunday, Malai, Keane Hernan, Liam O'Conneilla, they made an impact. They're building a panel. They have the physicality, the athleticism and the strong running for this new game. They have, in the middle third, the best high fielders in the game, and we know how vital the kick-out is. But, you know, I look at something, and you look at last year's All-Ireland final, and you're saying, am I seeing anything different? Last year, Galway should have probably won the All-Ireland final. They kicked it away. Their game management in the last 15 minutes, last 20 minutes was poor. Their decision-making, their shot execution, very poor. But I see a different team this year. I see greater game management and I see greater composure. So you saw two things. First of all, at the very start, they struggled at the start. They took a lot of 2-pointers and missed a few 2-pointers, but they didn't panic, because what they did then was they brought a bit of variety into their attack, and instead of focusing on the 2-pointers, they walked the ball into shooting positions. After Paul Conroy had scored his 3-pointers in a row, they didn't kick another 2-point. So that was number one. I thought their composure, like they struggled at the start, but they brought variety into attack. Good game management, good decision making, got the right players on the ball in space. And, you know, for 28 minutes, they outscored Mayo was a 1-8 to no score or something like that. Absolutely brilliant. But it was the end, and Dick referred to there, the last 17 minutes. The game was a draw. Mayo had the wind and Mayo had momentum. And in the last couple of years, like I said, in last year's final, Galway struggled in those clutch moments in that last quarter, but I thought their game management and composure was very good. As Dick alluded to, the points they had to score, some of them were quite difficult, but they outscored Mayo in that last 17 minutes, 4 points to 2. And there's an awful lot I see very good. I look at the championship to date, and we've seen them all now. And at the moment, I can put 4 counties, and it's very hard to say who's the number 1, who's number 2. But I see 4 counties at the moment that have impressed me the most, and that's Donegal and Armagh, which we'll see more of next weekend, Kerry and Galway. And they're a little bit of gap ahead to Dublin and Tyrone and the rest. But I was very, very impressed by Galway, very impressed.
Dick, can I just ask you, what does it do for a team when you win a game that is not even slightly against the grain? Mayo had got themselves back into that position. How much does that give you going forward, even to know, okay, we've been in a sticky spot before where the wind was against us, momentum was against us, the home crowd was against us, and we still pulled it out?
Yeah, and especially the way the new game is, Mike, like if you look at a lot of those plays that we talk about, like for the last couple of years, a lot of games were played and won. It was very formulaic, it was very tactical, it was very structured. like those plays, be it Darcy getting up, winning ball, that run that Killian McDade run. Remember that hard run he just took off? That's just instinctive. The Dylan McHugh block, they're instinctive big plays that you either have that in you or you don't. You know, you can't coach that. Players either have that willingness to get up and compete and win ball, put in tackles, make hard runs that there's no guarantee there's anything at the end of it. And like, it's only when you do that collectively as a team that you look back and say, you know, there's something in us here that, you can't just fake. You either have that or you don't. And Galway have demonstrated that. Now, it's all well and good having the desire to do that. You have to have the physical ability and the attributes to do it and do it down the home straight. Like, one of the issues with Galway last year was they didn't have a fully fit Killian McDade. They were playing a Comer and a Walsh that were half fit in an All-Ireland final. And you get the sense now that Pádraig Joyce realises, no, you're either fully fit or you're on the bench. And you're not going to win big games against big teams or carrying players just because they might have something in them. You got to be fit enough to carry that, because if any player out in that pitch wasn't fully fit, they were going to get exposed, like were some of the Mayo players. Like, not to be unfair, like Jim O'Connor has been a sort of a great player. He wasn't fully fit and wasn't at the pace of the game, and you could see that. He wasn't able to sort of contribute to the game that he normally does. And whereas Galway, all their players, and even Peter Cook coming off the bench, he's only got maybe 15-20 minutes at that high level, but he was able to contribute when he came in at that pace. So that's the key thing. They've got players that have that drive and desire to do the hard work and make the hard runs, but they're physically fit to go and deliver it when it matters. And that's a massive thing for any team to have.
Pat, from a Mayo point of view, is it too simplistic to say that this was the same old Mayo, that they got themselves into a position and probably weren't able to execute when push came to shove? They had themselves in a great position.
Do you know, first of all, look, I have great affection for Mayo. Mayo people, Mayo as a county, and Mayo footballers down through the years. They're warriors. They die with their boots on. I just love everything about them. And I felt sorry for them last Sunday. And do you know what I felt sorry about? Because, you know, nowadays we live in the world of social media. And I was looking at all the jokes last weekend. Leinster or the Mayo of rugby, you know. And you're sort of saying, that's unfair. Because I look at, and this is my rant today, you know, I see the rugby match last weekend, and you see the most highly paid professional team in the British Isles added with two world-class players in Snyman and Jordi Barrett, and they fail yet again. And they're professionals. They're paid to do a job, and when they get defeated, they deserve to be criticised. But I look around and I look at analysis, because myself and Dick, we're in the game of analysing Gaelic football, and we do it honest and straight, and we call it as we see it. And I look at the analysis of rugby, and I know I've got criticised over the years for this, and I look at the analysis of rugby, and it's a cosy little setup, because it's an old boys network, it's a school network, they're all palsy-wally with each other. There's no serious or critical analysis. And I look at the Irish rugby team, I remember criticised them in the Sunday World column, saying, like, there's only 8 top rugby teams in the world, 8 countries that are top, and Ireland haven't got past the last 8 ever in the World Cup, and that's the number one competition. Yet we start to glorify failures or model victories, and we blame a referee. And I see the same with Leinster last week. I didn't see the criticism, because there's all ex-players, and I don't see the criticism of Leinster, which they deserve, because they're highly paid to do a job, and they failed yet again. And I feel it's so wrong to compare them with Mayo. These Leinster players, because they're the darlings of the media, they're the darlings of corporate Ireland. Life goes on, they get paid, they get increased contracts, they get more sponsorship. Mayo lads were back at work on Monday morning. They certainly were all back at work on Tuesday morning. And they're doing it for the love of the county, for the green and red. And I just felt to compare them with Leinster Rugby is wrong. And I just felt sorry for them. And yes, there was a lot about their game last week that I thought was very good. The first 12 minutes, they had 73% possession. They were beating Galway by a goal. They're pressing, they're high press, they're tackling, their turnovers was very good. And Ryan O'Donoghue, after a struggling first half against Johnny McGrath, I think stood up to the plate in the second half. But you're right, it goes back to the same thing, Michael, as you said. It's the same old. And I look at, since the time they were beaten by Donegal in 2012, over the years with all the failures in their big matches, all Ireland finals, there's 2 characteristics. There's 2 things that stand out. Number 1, same old, forward inadequacies, forward failings. You look at, they got off 6 more shots last Sunday than Galway. They had 28 shots as opposed to Galway's 6. They had 5 scorers, and one of those was the goalie. 5 scorers. So a 16 out of 28 conversion rate, that's not good. In the first half, they went 28 minutes without no score in the first half. So you had forward inadequacies. But you had other problems. You had the kick out, which was at 30%, which is, like we said, in the new game. But forward inadequacies, forward failing. But it all was encapsulated into the final 17 minutes. And the final 17 minutes of last Sunday's game could be taken out of any of Mayo's glorious failures. Because what did you see? 17 minutes to go. The game a draw, wind behind Mayo, momentum behind Mayo, and the same failings. Lack of composure, poor decision making, poor shot execution, lack of leadership. You looked at the scores. In those 17 minutes, 8 shots at goal, 2 scores. They were from frees. No score from play in the last 17 minutes. The shooting overall, they had 9 2-point shots in the entire game. They scored 3. That's 1/3. But I looked at the final third, and you looked at block downs. 3 block downs. 4 block downs. Paul Towie was blocked down 3 times. Dylan McHugh's blocked down. You had Jack Carney being blocked down. You had Matthew Rowan, a high ball into Ryan O'Donoghue that went over the bar. You had Indo GAA straight through to the goal. Wrong option. Right man in the right place. But then it all boils down to the last play. The last play, and they're 2 points down. And the last play, you now nowadays in GAA management, I'm sure with role-playing gameplay scenario, that every county and probably even every club is practicing that last shot scenario, getting your best shooter into the best possible position to score that 2-pointer to win the game. And I looked at the last play. Outside the fact that the movement, there was little or no movement, but you're expecting, well, it'll be Ryan O'Donoghue, maybe Fergal Boland, who's a good shooter. You'll get one of them. But eventually, it's worked out to the swing for a low percentage shot by Matthew Rowan, who's kicking at a narrow angle, 45 metres, and he's kicking with the outside of the right foot. And in that 17 minutes of lack of composure and poor decision-making and poor shot options, that was Mayo in a nutshell. That's why they failed last Sunday, and that's why there's no All-Ireland in Mayo for a long time.
There was one example that sort of stood out to me. I can't remember how long into the second half it was. Mayo were right back in the game. There was a point or two in it. They got a free out on the opposite stand side, if you remember. It was a 2-pointer free, and Aidan O'Shea stood over it. Didn't look like he wanted to kick it. Then who came over?
Ryan O'Donoghue. I have it written in. 64 minutes.
64 minutes. That was a game winning. That was a game winning kick.
38 seconds.
That was
and Ryan O'Donoghue went for a 2-pointer. And if you can remember, he kicked the ball into Conor Gleeson's hands. Now, Ryan O'Donoghue is the best kicker in the game. Ryan O'Donoghue plays up in Belmullet, where he's shooting into wind on lots of club matches. Ryan O'Donoghue, on a normal day in Belmullet, would put that ball over the bar with his eyes closed. But this is a Connacht final. This is a pressure game. This is a game as a draw. The ball drops into the goalie's hand. Why does the ball drop into? That is fear. That is lack of conviction. That is what happens, Mayo players, in those clutch moments at the end of the game over the years. And it happened, Ryan O'Donoghue, who was their best forward last week, but that's a fear, that's lack of conviction.
No, I wasn't. That was another one, Pat. The other one, the one was on the opposite the stand side. Aidan O'Shea stood over it. Ryan O'Donoghue came over, looked, and I said, Ryan O'Donoghue, what are you doing over here? Yeah. That is not a kick for a right-footed kicker. You could sit and hit 50 of those shots and you might get 2. He's no business been over there. Yeah. That's a left-footed free taker's shot. He shouldn't have been anywhere near it, but it showed a lack of understanding or composure from Mayo in general. Who's taking these free kicks? Who's the man that steps up and hits a left-footed free kick?
Aidan kicked it wide.
And then he ended up having to kick it because there was, I'd say Ryan O'Donoghue stood there and said, well, I'm going to have to bend this off my right foot to have any chance, and that's completely ridiculous. At that stage, Aidan had no confidence. He never looked like he wanted to hit it, and then he missed it on the, as they say in golf, the amateur side, the short side with the wind. Like, if you look at Mayo, I don't remember since Kevin McLaughlin, he wasn't even really a left-footed kicker. They've never had an actually good left-footed free taker since Conor Mortimer retired, and that that those inches and those fine margins matter in big games and in many games over the years. So that's a simple thing that Mayo have never rectified. Having a good, reliable, confidence-backed left-footed free kicker for those clutch moments. You might only get 2 of them in a game, but in a point game or 2-point games, they're all the difference. And that was a prime example for me when I seen that playing out in front of us. That's poor coaching, that's poor decision making, that's poor confidence, that's everything encapsulated into one moment.
There was just that, when you saw Matthew Ruan after the game and how disappointed he was, he went down the tunnel, he had the jersey over the head, and we were kind of talking about, with the draw being made the previous week, whether, either team wanted to win the game. It was clear that both were absolutely ravenous for it. But just, Pat, on the draw being made the week before these finals are played, can you make sense of that? And how does that make sense in the grand scheme of things?
Everything to do with games promotion and marketing in the GAA world makes absolutely fucking no sense at all. It is absolutely stupid, whoever's driving. You go back to the very start of the year. So the week leading up to the National League finals, the 4 finals, it should have been a big build-up, marketing and publicity about the league finals. Oh, actually, not really. Most of the provincial championships were launched the week leading up to the finals. Holy Christ almighty. And then you do a draw before the provincial winners. It is absolutely a joke. And you try to maximise the publicity. You want to market our games. You want to promote our games. I don't know what it's like. I don't know what they're trying to do. But so you decide we're going to hold the draw before actually the provincial final played, which is Lula. That's number one. And you say, right, okay, well, we'll get a prime time slot. Okay, it used to be worse, I suppose. It used to be at 8:30 in the morning when no one was listening on the radio. But at least we put it on YouTube or whatever like that. On Wednesday lunchtime, holy Christ almighty, we can do a lot better. Everything about the marketing and promotion of the competitions, both provincial and national, are absolutely stupid.
Yeah, because that's
a capital S.
Yeah, because Galway's, how should we say, their advantage or benefit from winning the Connacht title is they're in this beautiful group of death. Oh, what a group, a lovely group. Galway, the losers of Donegal and Armagh, which has been played this weekend, Dublin and Derry. Now, Derry look up against it already there, but there's going to be 4 teams going hard in that with one going out, so that's going to be really interesting. I'll just fly through the groups real quick. You have Meath or Louth, the winners, with Clare, Monaghan and Down. You'd have to look at that group and say,
we're back, Pat.
That group, it's a hell of a lot weaker. Then you have Kerry, the losers of Meath and Louth, Roscommon and Cork, again a lot weaker than that group of death. And then that group 1, you have the winners of Armagh, Donegal, Mayo, Tyrone and Cavan. Again, probably the second worst group, I would say, as regards difficulty. But it just doesn't make sense that these draws will be made before these finals are.
Well, there's two aspects to it that this needs to be figured out. Like with all the wheels of change and rules, I think everyone's open to trying new ideas. If it doesn't work, pivot and do something better. Like, what should the draw, the seeding be for the All-Ireland series? It should be based on some sort of ranking for the best teams in the week, that you can't have what you have. And the only way you do that is on the league, not the provincial championships, because they are a complete distortion of what the proper ranking of it. So that's that. And so what happened this year could invariably happen next year again, once that's the way the system. Now, they're trying to obviously retain the relevance of the provincial championships and have it linked. And I get that to a point. But if you actually look at what happened at the weekend there, the All-Ireland series had no impact on the status of that Connacht final. So it shows that if we have that detachment, that the provincial finals, if they do matter, they can stand on their own merits, and whatever happens, it shouldn't have to be taken into account for the All-Ireland series. They should have been done on the league standings, had a fair draw, have it set out, and play the Connacht Championships, the Ulster Championship, that standalone fixtures like the Caribou Cup or the Europa League, and all these things are celebrated on their own merits. And then that'll allow you to have the draws, proper timings, have the league, really good competition that it links into the All-Ireland series. I don't think there's a whole pile of creativity is needed to figure that out. It just needs a few bold decisions.
Yeah.
But our problem, Michael, is there's two. For all of this lack of promotion, lack of marketing, and lack of jeopardy is we've squeezed our competitions into such a tight time frame. There are too many matches being played in too tight. We can't afford. We can't have proper build up for our big games. We can't promote our big games. We can't promote our competitions. And while we're on it, I mean, the announcement from the president last week that, oh, by the way, after Tom Ryan suggesting that, well, maybe August is a possibility for All-Ireland finals, and Jarlath suggesting, yeah, we might even go to September. Guess what happens last week? And we said, absolutely no, we're not. The finals are going to be in July. And I think this is just... I was looking at a stat as an interesting poll from the Sunday Independent last week. Ireland thinks the May 2025 poll, and the question asked was, when should GAA All-Ireland finals take place? 6% said July, 21% said August, 53% said September, and 20% had no idea. So that's 74% say the All-Ireland finals should be in August or September. And
how many club players were polled?
You'd never know. Maybe they were all.
I doubt it somehow.
Don't give me that crap about club. I'll tell you this now.
Certainly, every county player is a club player.
Yes, but the problem with club, the problem with the neglect of club players under the old system. The problem was caused by two things. Was caused by inefficient county boards who couldn't organise the competitions properly. That
still exists.
And secondly, county boards who were subservient to the county manager who dictated when games should be played.
But that still exists as well.
Right, but let's say, I take Kerry. Under the old system, Kerry players had 3 or 4 district games. They had 8 league games, and then when Kerry played out the championship, then they went on to the championship. So the Kerry club players always got loads of matches, no problem. I know where you're coming from. Yes, it's vital that club fixtures are set in stone and club players get a regular amount of games and know when they're going. But at the moment, what's going to happen is with this squeezed, congested season, we're not promoting our 2 main competitions into county football only. We're not promoting our stars. And what's happening is, and Jarlath left the cat out the bag by saying, well, Croke Park is a big money earner now. That's where we get all our money from. Concerts and rugby matches and whatever like that. But I think so he who pays the piper calls the tune. Croke Park Stadium is running the show now. They're generating the money. But I think it's a known goal because we're not promoting our games and competitions. And when you're having a draw the week before the provincial finals on a Wednesday afternoon, you're not promoting it.
Yeah, just on that, I actually would put everything back 2 weeks. I'm a big club advocate, but I don't think 2 weeks makes that much of a difference.
No.
I'd probably started maybe even a week earlier and just buying yourself a hell of a lot of time there. But club players, and who are obviously county players as well, or county players are club players, they do love knowing when their fixtures are and knowing that you can go here and go there and you're not going to miss anything.
I get it, Mike.
Yeah.
I get it. The split season in theory is a great idea, but it needs tweaking. We could stretch it out 2 weeks here, 1 week there, with a bit of thinking outside the box, which sadly isn't. But everyone is, in fairness, when it comes to the GAA world, and our officials are no different than other one. We can be thick and stubborn and dig in our heels and refuse to admit, maybe there's something wrong here. I've no problem. Club players deserve respect. County players respect. County competitions deserve proper respect. But when you're going all the year round in congested spaces, time frame for intercounty, that's wrong.
Yeah. One thing I've always, because it was the way in Monaghan and a lot of places before the whole thing changed, was that there was always a gap of 4 to 6 weeks between the end of the league and the start of the championship. The players went back to their club and they would either they'd get a chunk of the league games played or even a first round of the championship played. So that actually then sort of tapered what had to be played when they came back. So they got a bit of a head start, and that all worked quite well. There was probably just a few too many games. Like, one of the issues that bugs me now at this time of year, whatever about too many games from a GAA's perspective jammed in, you're sharing the airwaves with the end of the Premier League, the Champions League, the Europa League, all the rugby. There's so many other competitions that are going on at the same time. There's only so much you can watch. There's only so much. So all of the provincial championships are basically getting dwarfed by other sports, even if they are good on their own right, because there's only so many column inches, there's only so many hours in the TV people can watch, kids as well. Whereas actually, if you had club football going on now for the next 3 or 4 weeks, which would be great, the whole thing is mandating. And I think this is one of the issues that Jarlath touched on. It's mandating clubs that everybody has to follow a similar structure, that if you're going to give us a window there, it actually allows you to shorten the club season when you come back, get around the championships, get a few league games played. It's good for players. I used to always love getting back playing a bit of club football, especially if you were a fringe player, that you weren't getting much, or you're coming back from injury, get a bit of competitive reps under your belt. I think a bit of creative thinking could have been thought about that. This idea that has to be split, I don't think so. It doesn't apply in an awful lot of other sports, whereas the likes of the Irish rugby team and provincial champions, they run parallel. International soccer clubs, they all run in parallel. They have their sort of times and they step out of the way.
Yes.
So you're not re-engineering the wheel here. You're just sort of trying to be a wee bit more creative. But here, it's not going to be for this year. It doesn't look like it's going to be for next year, which is disappointing.
The problem, Dick, is if there's any sort of wiggle room there, county managers will dictate, and that's a fact.
Yeah, well, that's a failing on the people in charge.
That's county board.
That's a bad excuse.
It is. I agree. But how many counties does it happen in? It happens in most counties where.
I'll tell you what. The one thing that takes out money. Tell a county board, said, here, you're getting a grant from Croke Park. Everyone gets money. Says, you don't follow this, you don't get the money, and then see who follows. This is it.
Hey, you'd be surprised. You get some big corporate backer in, and they'll pick up the shortfall.
Look, Michael, in Kerry, there's a fixture schedule at the start of the year, and every Sunday is dictated for club fixtures or for county fixtures, and it's set in stone. It never changes, irrespective of whether Kerry are in the championship or out of the championship. Everyone knows. I mean, there'll be 8 county league games played before Kerry players are back playing championship. So there's no shortage of games. There's a fixed timetable, and there is no wheeling or dealing. Jack O'Connor will not be getting on to the Kerry County Board saying, I need this weekend off. No.
Okay. Listen, I'm sure this is a debate.
For another day,
the debate we will have
again.
Back
to that.
Pat, you mentioned Kerry there, obviously. Listen, the Munster final was over before it started, really. We got very excited about the Munster semi-final against Cork. It was a brilliant game, so dramatic, right down to the last play, the last kick. And realistically, this was, like, you talk about arm's length, like they had him in another field nearly after about 5 or 10 minutes, and the game was over, really.
After 3.5 minutes, Michael, I was taking notes, and after 3.5 minutes, I wrote down 1 Kerry, 1-2, Clare no score, game over. And it was game over. So it was serious analysis is probably out of the question, because it was Division 1 team against a Division 2 team. It was men against boys. The difference between Division 1 and Division 3 was start last week. It's speed of thought, speed of action. Kerry do things that much quicker. In Division 3, you have that extra second on the ball. You have that extra bit of space. When Clare comes against Kerry, that extra second isn't there, that space isn't there. Look, Clare can hold their head up high in terms of the second half. They outscored Kerry 14-10. They scored 21 points, which is good rattling. But Kerry, and look, Clare never looked like winning enough. But of course, it was pure kamikaze tactics. They decided, whether they decided or not, they left Kerry have to kick out. Holy God Almighty! So you give the kick out to quality footballers, heads up football, intelligent boys. Sure, there was only going to be one result. Kerry's performance in the first half was very, very good. 14 to 7 points. Their kicking, their intelligence, their movement. Have they learned some things from the Cork game? I did. They were working a bit more on 3-pointers last week. They scored 1 against Cork. That was an extra time. They scored 3 last week. Their shooting efficiency was much better even again. They kicked 12 wides against Cork. They only kicked 4 wides against Clare. But I was looking at the stat, and this was, I thought, this is interesting now. In the last 20 minutes, in the 20 minutes of extra time against Cork, Kerry scored 1-4, kicked no wide. Last Sunday against Clare, it was the 30th minute where they kicked the first wide. So that was 50 minutes. In 50 minutes of playing time, Kerry scored 5 goals and 11 points without kicking a wide. That's absolutely brilliant.
Is that to do with, Pat, where they're taking the shot from, that they're being more conservative, or is it just extremely good accuracy, do you think?
It's 2 things. Now in the modern game, there's space, and they're moving the ball into space, and they're getting shooters in space, time and space. Their movement is brilliant. Their heads-up kicking game is absolutely superb. They seem to be enjoying themselves. They're playing as a team. They're playing great variety. And I look at one stat, and you see, what's different and what I like about them, outside the fact that they're learnings from the Cork game in trying to get more 2-point shooters, and Seanie O'Shea coming back is a big benefit. But the big thing that stands out this year with them is that the ruthlessness in getting goals. In the 10 league and championship games to date, they've scored 24 goals. Last year in the 2 Munster championship games, and that was against Cork and Clare, they scored no goal. This year in the 2 Munster championship games, they've scored 7 goals. So I was very, very impressed. Second half was sloppy, but the game was over. But I was very, very impressed. They're building a panel. They were missing 5 or 6 players. I can see they've had an extra bonus. Barry Dan has been a revelation at midfield. And it looks like that Barry Dan will hold his place. When Diarmuid O'Connor comes back, Barry Dan will partner with Diarmuid O'Connor at midfield. And now the solution is there, which has been a problem area for you, the wing forward positions, which we're struggling. Paddy will start at centre forward. But I can see wing forward positions now of Seanie O'Shea and Joe O'Connor. And that's a bit like Galway. That's putting those big ball winners, those powerful runners in a wing forward position. So it was a very good day at the office in Kerry. And like, you look at the draw, I mean, Christ, talk about being poxed. This is the second year in a row in the qualifiers that Kerry will not face a Division 1 county. And by the way, Monaghan are doing all right for them, because Monaghan, even though they operated in Division 2, will be the highest play. Am I correct in stating this? Monaghan, who played in Division 2 this year, will be the highest placed league team in their group.
You're right. Yeah, you're right.
Bonkers.
Yeah, it is a bit
of reward.
For what exactly?
Anyway, but so looking at the Kerry, I felt sorry for Clare. Like Clare are one county, and I always sort of, as you know, at this stage, fight for the underdog. And Clare for a county that have no business been as competitive as they have been in football over the last decade. Keep turning out and good competitive footballers, and it's must be a tough sell to get boys to commit to playing football there, especially when the hurling team's back competing for All Ireland's. Like, I was, what really annoyed me, Mike, and I listened to you hurling man, as they call them, giving out about the Tipperary black or red card a couple of weeks ago, and how it shouldn't have been happened, and how you love the sledge league, and it should be like. I agree, right? To a point. Now, you can't assault a man with a weapon. Obviously, that's sort of maybe steps over the line. But like, Emma McMahon got a black card for Clare after whatever it was, 10. I think there were 6 points down at the time, and like, that was game over. Like, whatever, but as a spectacle, like it mightn't. They might never have won the game, but like, Kerry went and scored ran in a few goals after that. And I just said, that whole game and spectacle, like the Tipperary Cork game example, it was just destroyed as a spectacle. And I'm like, did the referee need to do that? Like, did he need to do that? Like, I go to club games. We all go to club games now that the black card is largely forgotten. They don't play it. And yet you have to be sort of pernickety with the likes of that. Nobody in the ground would have give out if the referee hadn't have given him a black card in that instance. That's not what the black card was brought in for. The black card was for deliberate, cynical challenges up in front of goal. I think that just really annoyed me, and it sort of when I look back, it shouldn't have been. It wasn't, Pat. Like, if you look at the game, if you look at there was blocks and checks in that Galway Mayo game. When you get into a really physical, intense game, there's probably about half a dozen technical black cards. You could go back and apply the rule. So we don't apply the letter of the law.
So do you want?
Hey, 1 second, Dick. Let the protected forward have his say.
All right. So you want Gaelic football referees to operate like hurling referees with a sort of a la carte approach. So
discretion. Common sense discretion, Pat. Yes.
That's not common.
Yes.
Rules are rules. Rules are rules. You can't have an a la carte approach that says, right, I'll pull this hand pass, but the next 10 throws are okay. So, right, you're talking about the black card. And yes, it did cost Clare dearly. Clare were 7 points down when Emmett McMahon got black carded. By the time Emmett McMahon came back on again, Clare were now 14 points down. They conceded 2-2 to 1 point. Right. But back up again, like George Hoop, back up the cat. And it was a deliberate, Emmett McMahon deliberately pulled the leg of the Kerry player and in front of the referee. Christ almighty, you have to. unfortunately, like, you have to blow, you have to award the black card.
I get it, right? And it's no more when Verity and the boys were complaining about, like, they get it. It was technically a breach, but that doesn't get away from Pat. There are multiple times in multiple games that referees play discretion and they sort of don't technically implement the black card rule. So it's not a case that it's consistent. It is not.
In this case,
and in club football, it's actually, if you go to club football now, it's rare, only in the most obvious, blatant examples that a black card will be issued, because they have to show a bit of common sense as well. I just felt, again, the game as a spectacle, to leave the field of play for any infringement, it should be at a very high bar. And it should be within complete doubt.
A referee is there to implement the rules. The rules are rules. It was a clear and obvious black card offence. The referee made the right decision. And we can't go down the road of, Jesus, look, we'll give him a couple of handy frees because the team is losing a lot. Or should there a week count in?
I'm writing that down for when it comes against Kerry at some stage this year. I'm going to remind you, Pat. Yeah,
black card.
Pat, I'll tell you a good one. You taught PE for how many years? 30 years?
30-something years, yeah.
I taught PE for 4 years anyway. And we were doing a sports day and we were playing Olympic handball at the end, and whoever won this great game, it is a brilliant game. It's such a good game, and whoever won this game was going to win the overall sports day. It's a dream scenario. It could come down to this, and the place was rocking, but one team were winning 8-2, and I let human kind of consciousness come into it, and I said I blew something for over Kerry and they took too many steps, and all of a sudden the 8-2 up turned into 9-8 down, completely changed the game, the momentum, the whole thing, and it was absolute carnage after. Now, I mean to say absolute carnage. So you have to be careful when a referee lets any human kind of qualities come into it, or taking pity at all. I learned a valuable lesson.
Lads, can I tell you my Olympic handball story? I was a guest speaker at a coaching conference one time, but just so it was to waffle about anything. And I knew goddamn well, because they were looking at me up on the stage, and I knew what's going to happen. This dinosaur doesn't know anything about the modern game and modern tactics and modern drills and do. And I said, I'm going to bluff these boys today. No, I'm going to dazzle these boys. And I said, I'm going to dazzle them with some innovative drills that they'd never come across. And like that, I checked out the other sports. I said, what sport could be close to Gaelic football? And Olympic handball was the sport I hit on. And I said, right, Olympic handball, throwing. So what I'll do is I'll get the advanced Olympic handball throwing drills, and I'll make them hand passing drills. And I got a friend of mine to put them on for a PowerPoint presentation, and he did the stuff and all that. And I said, right, lads, I know you're here looking for ideas, and here's a couple of good drills here now for hand passing. And I'll never forget it. Jesus, the minute they saw it, they all started writing furiously. And I'm sort of staying there, lads, am I going to tell them the truth now and say I'm bullshitting them, or I'm going to say, look, I pretend nothing and say, Spillane is a bit of a genius here? And I said, no, lads. I said, lads, I'm just after bluffing you there. I said, these have nothing to do with Gaelic football. I haven't a clue what they're working on, but I'm after bluffing you because you're like fucking sheep. You're looking for the next new idea, your next new drill, and you think that's the fucking thing. So anyway, Olympic handball, brilliant.
Great game. Brilliant game. Brilliant game.
Tonight on the 12 training.
It's actually, do you know what it is? It's a really good pre-season game. It's a pre-season game. You have 4 teams. You split your team into 4, maybe 5 apiece. They each play each other. Winners play in the final. Game going on here. Losers playing a wooden spoon game over here. But lads, you've been very good with your time again. We'll be back again next week to talk more football. Thanks a million to Dick and to Pat. We'll talk to you again soon, lads.